The night the Beaumont empire collapsed, they came crawling to the man they'd called the Help for 3 years, and he held the one secret that could destroy them forever. Maxwell Zhao heard the footsteps before the knock came. Rapid, uneven, desperate. Through the thin walls of the pool house, he could hear chaos erupting in the main mansion, raised voices, slamming doors, the sharp ring of phones that no one wanted to answer. The LED screen on his desk glowed with breaking news. Beaumont Global Industries stock crashes 83% amid FDA investigation. The door burst open. Esther stood in the threshold, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her silk blouse wrinkled like she'd been clutching it for hours. Her hands shook as she gripped the doorframe. "Maxwell," her voice cracked. "We need you." He didn't move from his chair. Just watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes that had absorbed 3 years of insults without flinching, the same eyes that had witnessed her father toast to lowered expectations at their wedding reception. The same eyes that had watched her mother literally turn her back when he tried to contribute to family discussions. "My father had a stroke." Esther stepped inside, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. "The board is threatening to resign. Our lawyers say bankruptcy and prison are both on the table. The FDA found irregularities in our overseas manufacturing facilities, substandard ingredients, safety violations. Everything's falling apart. Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is." Maxwell remained silent. Behind Esther, he could see movement in the mansion's lit windows, shadows pacing, figures hunched over phones, the physical manifestation of panic. Reginald Beaumont, the man who'd called him the charity case for 36 months, was lying in a hospital bed. Cordelia Beaumont, who'd served him last at every family dinner, was sedated in the West Wing. Dashiell Beaumont, who'd nicknamed him the Help at parties, was probably spiraling somewhere between rage and terror. "They're asking for you." Esther moved closer, her perfume mixing with the scent of fear. "My mother actually said your name. She said, 'Tell him we'll acknowledge him publicly. Just make him help us.'" Maxwell's jaw tightened. Acknowledge him publicly. After 3 years of erasure, 3 years of being invisible in his own marriage, 3 years of watching them destroy his dignity at every Sunday dinner, while he smiled and stayed silent. "Please." Esther's knees nearly buckled. "I know what they've done to you. I know I should have fought harder, but they're still my family. And if this company goes down, it's not just them. It's 8,000 employees. It's patients who depend on affordable medications. I know exactly what's at stake." Maxwell's voice cut through her pleading like a blade through silk. He stood, walked to his filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder marked Beaumont Global Confidential. When he turned back, his expression hadn't changed. "I've been ready for this moment for 2 years, but there's something you need to see first. If you've ever been underestimated by people who should have believed in you, hit that like button right now. Your comment might be exactly what someone scrolling desperately needs to hear." Esther stared at the folder like it might explode. Her fingers hesitated before touching it, as if crossing some invisible line she couldn't uncross. Maxwell watched her internal battle play out across her face. Confusion, curiosity, dread. "What is this?" she whispered. He didn't answer, just opened the folder and spread documents across his cluttered desk. Financial spreadsheets, email printouts, photographs of shipping manifests, meeting transcripts, pages and pages of evidence arranged in chronological order, each one dated, annotated, cross-referenced. Esther's eyes widened as she recognized the data. "These are from our Sunday dinners. When my father was discussing quarterly reports, when Dashiell was bragging about overseas expansion, when—" She looked up sharply. "You were listening. The whole time we thought you were just sitting there, you were—" "Learning," Maxwell's tone held no emotion. Every dismissive comment, every business detail your family thought was too complex for the help to understand. Every careless revelation spoken in front of me like I was furniture. She picked up a spreadsheet showing profit margins from the Manila facility. Her hand trembled as she traced the numbers, seeing what Maxwell had seen months ago, the pattern of inflated revenues that didn't match production costs. The impossible efficiency that could only mean one thing, corners being cut. You knew? Her voice barely made sound. Before the FDA, before the investigation, you knew they were compromising safety protocols. Maxwell pulled out another document, his master's thesis from State University on pharmaceutical supply chain ethics. The same degree her father had mocked as participation trophy education. The same academic credential Cordelia had dismissed as not real scholarship. I didn't just know, Maxwell said quietly. I documented everything. I built financial models projecting exactly when the house of cards would collapse. I identified which executives were corrupt and which were ignorant. I traced the money flows through shell companies your father thought were hidden. Esther sank into the only other chair in the room, her designer dress crumpling against cheap upholstery. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn us? Would they have listened? Maxwell's question hung in the air like smoke. Would Reginald have taken advice from the man he introduced as my daughter's unfortunate choice? Would your mother have trusted analysis from someone she literally served last at meals? The silence between them filled with 3 years of accumulated hurt. Every humiliation Maxwell had endured. Every time Esther had defended him weakly in private, but stayed silent in public. Every moment she'd chosen family peace over her husband's dignity. I can save them, Maxwell said finally. I have a complete restructuring plan. But there's more you need to know. Something I found buried in the archives. Something that changes everything. Comment, I see you, if you've ever been invisible to people who needed you most. Let's build a community where everyone's brilliance is recognized. 24 months before that night, Maxwell had sat at his first Beaumont family Sunday dinner as Esther's husband. The dining room was larger than his childhood apartment, crystal chandeliers casting gold light across Italian marble, oil paintings of dead ancestors judging from gilded frames, place settings worth more than his monthly salary. Reginald sat at the head of the table, silver hair perfectly styled, speaking into his phone about stock prices. Cordelia arranged flowers in a vase, her movements precise and cold. Dashiell scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging Maxwell's presence. Esther squeezed Maxwell's hand under the table, a gesture meant to comfort that only emphasized how much comfort he'd need. So, Maxwell, Reginald finally ended his call. Esther tells us you work in data analysis, for a consulting firm, a mid-tier firm, she said. The emphasis on mid-tier landed like a slap. Maxwell smiled anyway. Yes, sir. I specialize in financial modeling and risk assessment. Fascinating. The word dripped with everything except fascination. And you met our daughter at a soup kitchen. How charitable. Cordelia laughed, a sound like ice cracking. Dashiell didn't look up from his phone. The staff brought the first course. Maxwell noticed he received his plate 30 seconds after everyone else. A small thing. The first of many small things that would add up to systematic erasure. We're expanding our operations in Manila, Reginald said to the table, to everyone except Maxwell. Profit margins there are extraordinary. Labor costs are a fraction of domestic. Regulatory oversight is minimal. We can produce generics at 60% reduction in cost. Maxwell's analytical mind caught it immediately. 60% reduction was too high. Even accounting for labor and regulatory differences, that number suggested dangerous shortcuts. But he stayed silent. Just the charity case. just the help. "How's your mother doing, dear?" Cordelia asked Esther, pointedly not asking about Maxwell's family. "She's well. She and Dad send their regards." "Such lovely people, real professionals. I was telling Margot just yesterday about your mother's gallery opening." Maxwell's mother was dead. His father was dead. No one had asked. Week after week, Maxwell sat at that table. Week after week, he absorbed information while being treated like he wasn't there. Dashiell's bragging about offshore accounts. Reginald's complaints about excessive FDA safety requirements. Cordelia's gossip about which board members were getting too old, too ethical, too inconvenient. And every night after Esther fell asleep, Maxwell went to his pool house office and entered data into spreadsheets. Built models, ran projections, connected dots that the arrogant Beaumonts couldn't see because they were too busy celebrating their own cleverness. The overseas facilities weren't just cutting costs. They were cutting corners, substituting inferior ingredients, falsifying quality control reports, shipping medications that barely met minimum efficacy standards, sometimes failing to meet them at all. Maxwell knew, had known for 18 months before the FDA investigation began, had documented every warning sign, had built a timeline showing exactly when the scandal would break and what the consequences would be. But who would listen to the charity case? Maxwell made copies of everything. Encrypted files, off-site storage, multiple backups. He maintained his relationships with former colleagues, ethical professionals in consulting, regulation, competitive pharmaceutical companies. The network Reginald's arrogance had never bothered building because he thought the Beaumont name was network enough. Late one Thursday night, Maxwell found something else, deep in the company's archived database, accessible only because IT had given him basic credentials as Esther's spouse. A folder marked Original Patents, Restricted. His cursor hovered over it, clicked, and everything changed. Maxwell's hands had frozen on the keyboard that night. The folder contained patent applications from 30 years ago, original formulations for generic drug manufacturing processes, revolutionary chemistry that had launched Beaumont Global from regional supplier to national powerhouse. But the name on the patents wasn't Reginald Beaumont, it was Adrian Zhao. Maxwell enlarged the scanned signature, compared it to his own last name, his father's name. Opened file after file, patent transfers, legal documents, partnership agreements that slowly morphed into dissolution paperwork, then outright ownership claims by Reginald Beaumont. His father had been a chemist, a brilliant one, according to Maxwell's childhood memories, though those memories were painted in shades of struggle and disappointment. Adrian Zhao had worked constantly, sacrificed everything for his research. Yet they'd lived in poverty. He'd died young, worn down by stress and bitterness Maxwell had never fully understood. Until now. The documents told a story. Adrian and Reginald had been partners. Adrian provided the genius, the chemical innovations that revolutionized generic drug manufacturing. Reginald provided the business connections and startup capital, 50-50 partnership, equal shares. Then the paperwork shifted. Amendments to the partnership agreement, changes in ownership percentages. Legal challenges filed by Reginald claiming Adrian had breached contract terms. Countersuits filed by Adrian that were eventually dropped, probably because he couldn't afford lawyers like the Beaumonts could. Final documents showed Adrian Zhao signing away all rights. Maxwell recognized the date. He'd been 7 years old. He remembered his father coming home that day, sitting in their apartment's dim kitchen, just staring at the wall for hours. Within 2 years, Adrian was dead. Heart attack, the doctors said. Stress-induced, Maxwell now understood. And Reginald Beaumont had built an empire on stolen brilliance. Maxwell sat in his pool house that night, staring at evidence of the crime that had destroyed his father. He could take it public. destroy the Beaumonts, claim what should have been his family's legacy, get justice for a man who died broken and forgotten. But he didn't, not yet, because strategy mattered more than rage. Instead, Maxwell had continued his quiet documentation, continued playing the invisible son-in-law, continued absorbing their contempt while building an arsenal they couldn't imagine existed. Now, standing in that same pool house with Esther looking at him with desperate eyes, Maxwell made his choice. He reached past the Beaumont Global confidential folder and pulled out another one. This one marked simply, Adrian. "Before I show you my restructuring plan," Maxwell said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest, "you need to understand why I really married you, and why I'm really going to save your family." Esther opened the folder. Her face went pale as she read. Patent documents, her grandfather's signature alongside Adrian Zhao's, legal warfare, systematic theft. "Your father didn't build the Beaumont empire." Maxwell's words were careful, measured. "He stole it, from my father, the brilliant chemist who actually created the formulations that made your family's fortune possible. The man Reginald destroyed through legal manipulation and financial warfare. The man who died penniless while you grew up in mansions built on his work." Esther's hand covered her mouth. "Maxwell, I didn't know. I swear I didn't." "I know." And he did. Esther had been a child when these crimes occurred. "I married you because I loved you. That was real. I didn't know about any of this until months after our wedding." She scrolled through documents, her breathing rapid and shallow. "This is why you asked about archives access, why you've been working late, why you—" She looked up, tears streaming. "What are you going to do?" Maxwell pulled out his laptop, opened a file. "I'm going to show you my complete restructuring plan. 73 pages. Every detail of how to save Beaumont Global from collapse, which divisions to sell, which executives to replace, which board members can be trusted, how to settle with the FDA, how to rebuild public trust, how to transform this company into something ethical." Her eyes widened as she scrolled through pages of analysis, financial projections, implementation timelines, stakeholder communications. "Maxwell, this could actually work. How long have you been preparing this?" He looked at her carefully. "Since our wedding night, when your father toasted to lowered expectations." What would you do in Maxwell's position? Comment below. Your perspective matters. Share this with someone who needs to know their power. The main house boardroom had never seen Maxwell Zhao. In 3 years of marriage, he'd been excluded from every business discussion, every family strategy session, every moment that mattered to the Beaumont legacy. The room itself seemed to reject his presence. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, portraits of previous Beaumont CEOs staring down with inherited superiority. Now Maxwell stood at the head of the table where Reginald usually sat. Esther beside him. The remaining Beaumonts arranged around the table like defendants awaiting sentencing. Reginald looked diminished in his wheelchair, half his face still slack from the stroke, one hand trembling against the armrest. Cordelia sat rigid in her chair, prescription bottles visible in her designer handbag. Dashiell sprawled with false casualness, his bloodshot eyes betraying substances and sleepless nights. 3 board members had stayed, the ones Maxwell had identified as ethical in his analysis. 2 lawyers, 1 crisis management consultant. All of them looking at Maxwell like he was a ghost that had suddenly materialized. "Thank you for coming," Maxwell said simply. No emotion, no triumph, just business. "We're grateful for your assistance." Reginald's words slurred slightly. The great patriarch reduced to needing help from the man he'd systematically humiliated. Maxwell distributed copies of his restructuring plan. Physical documents, 3-hole punched in navy folders. Professional, comprehensive, undeniable. Page 1 outlines immediate actions required to prevent bankruptcy. Page 12 details the negotiation strategy with the FDA. Page 27 covers executive replacements. Page 45 addresses victim compensation. Page 68 presents the long-term transformation roadmap. The board members flipped through pages, their expressions shifting from skepticism to surprise to something approaching respect. One of them, a woman named Janet, who'd always been kind to Maxwell at company events, looked up with barely concealed amazement. "This is extraordinary work. How did you—" "Why would you help us?" Daschle interrupted, his voice sharp with suspicion and hostility. "What do you want? Money? Position? Control? What's your real angle?" Maxwell met his brother-in-law's bloodshot stare without flinching. "I want nothing." "Everyone wants something," Reginald managed, his working hand gripping the wheelchair arm. "Position, equity, recognition, name your price." "I want nothing," Maxwell repeated. "No executive position, no equity stake, no public recognition. I'm implementing this plan for 3 reasons. He held up fingers. 1, Esther asked me to. 2, 8,000 employees don't deserve to lose their livelihoods because of your greed. 3, patients depend on affordable medications that actually work. Cordelia tried her manipulation, voice weak but calculating. "We always knew you were capable, Maxwell. Esther chose well. We just wanted to test your character." Maxwell's jaw tightened. The lie hung in the air, transparent and pathetic. "Implementation starts Monday," he continued, ignoring her. "You'll cooperate completely with every directive. You'll be transparent with regulators. You'll replace the executives I've identified as corrupt. You'll sell the compromised overseas operations to the buyers I've already negotiated with. You'll do exactly what I say, exactly when I say it, or this company dies and you face criminal prosecution." The room fell silent. For the first time in Beaumont family history, someone other than Reginald was issuing orders, and everyone knew they had no choice but to obey. "You expect us to believe you want nothing?" Reginald's face darkened, his functioning eye narrowing. "Everyone has an angle, Maxwell. What's yours? What's your real game?" Maxwell stood, gathering his copies of the plan. "You'll understand soon enough. We start at 8 Monday morning. I suggest you rest." He walked toward the door, then paused, turned back. "One more thing, Reginald. Do you remember a chemist named Adrian Zhao?" The color drained from Reginald's already pale face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Cordelia's hand flew to her throat. Even Daschle straightened in his chair, some distant memory triggering recognition. That's impossible," Reginald finally whispered. "How do you—" "Monday morning." Maxwell's voice cut through the patriarch's confusion like a scalpel. "We'll discuss everything then. If this moment moved you, subscribe to this channel for more stories where the underestimated rise and the powerful learn humility. You're not just watching, you're part of this movement." Maxwell returned to the pool house after the boardroom meeting, his shoulders tight with tension. He refused to show the Beaumonts. The photograph still sat on his desk. Adrian Zhao in his laboratory coat, young and brilliant, holding infant Maxwell with a smile that believed the world was fair. Esther followed him in, closing the door softly. "You never answered me. What are you going to do with this information? About my grandfather and your father?" Maxwell sat at his desk, pulling up implementation schedules on his laptop. Monday was 48 hours away. 48 hours to finalize negotiations with competing pharmaceutical companies. 48 hours to coordinate with FDA regulators he'd been cultivating for months. 48 hours before the Beaumonts would discover exactly how much power the invisible son-in-law actually held. "I'm going to save your family," he said quietly. "That's not an answer." Esther's voice cracked. You have evidence that could destroy us completely. Stolen patents, corporate theft. You could claim ownership of half the company. You could send my father to prison. You could... I could. Maxwell finally looked at her. I spent 6 months after finding those files imagining exactly that. Watching your father's empire crumble. Seeing him lose everything like my father did. Taking back what was stolen. Why didn't you? Maxwell touched the photograph. Because my father believed medicine should heal people, not enrich criminals. He believed in integrity even when it cost him everything. If I destroy your family for revenge, I become what your grandfather was, someone who puts personal gain over principles. Esther sank into the chair across from him, her designer clothes looking suddenly out of place in his modest workspace. So you'll save us, restructure the company, and then what? We just continue? Family dinners where everyone pretends the last 3 years didn't happen? No. Maxwell's response was immediate. I'm doing this for the employees who need jobs, for the patients who need medications, for the legacy my father should have had, a company that operates with the integrity he always demanded. But I want nothing from your family. No position, no equity, no recognition, and no relationship with them. Esther's statement wasn't a question. Maxwell's silence was answer enough. What about us? Her whisper barely reached across the desk. What happens to us when this is over? Before Maxwell could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Janet, the board member. Reginald trying to contact his lawyers privately. Thinks he can negotiate around you. Thought you should know. Maxwell showed Esther the message. Her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Even now, even when you're the only thing standing between him and complete destruction, he's trying to manipulate. You'll understand soon enough. Maxwell stood, gathering files. Implementation starts Monday. I suggest you rest. Those had been his exact words to Reginald. Now Esther heard them directed at her, recognizing the distance they created. Maxwell, please, don't shut me out. I'm not them. I've never been... Monday morning. His voice held no anger, just finality. Everything changes Monday morning. Monday arrived with news vans parked outside the Beaumont estate gates. Maxwell drove past them in his modest sedan, the press not recognizing him as anyone important. Inside the estate, panic had transformed into reluctant compliance. The next 90 days became a masterclass in strategic dismantling and reconstruction. Maxwell moved through the company like a surgeon removing cancer, precise, methodical, showing no hesitation. Week 1. He sold the Manila facility to a competing pharmaceutical company for $340 million. The sale made headlines. Mysterious strategist begins Beaumont global restructuring. Week 2. Maxwell replaced the CFO, 2 VPs, and the entire quality control department. The executives he fired threatened lawsuits. Maxwell's response was releasing internal emails proving their knowledge of safety violations. The lawsuits disappeared overnight. Week 3. He settled with the FDA for $120 million, including victim compensation funds. The agency's director, a woman Maxwell had consulted with during his previous career, publicly praised the transparency. Week 4. Maxwell initiated the first ethical board meeting in Beaumont Global's history. Every safety protocol reviewed, every cost-cutting measure examined for patient impact, every decision documented for public record. The media coverage shifted. Beaumont Global's ethical transformation led by unknown consultant. Maxwell refused every interview request, declined every photo opportunity. When Janet suggested he take a public role as chief restructuring officer, he simply said no and continued working 18-hour days from his pool house office. The Beaumonts watched in stunned silence as the charity case systematically saved their empire while stripping away everything that had made it corrupt. Reginald, recovering from his stroke, could only observe as his former authority evaporated. Daschle tried one final attempt at dominance. He cornered Maxwell in the parking garage after a late-night board meeting, his expensive suit rumpled, his breath carrying the chemical sweetness of cocaine. "You think saving us makes you family?" Daschle's laugh was brittle. "You think this changes anything? You're still nothing. You'll always be nothing. The guy who married up and got lucky." Maxwell looked at him for 3 seconds, then walked past without responding. Didn't acknowledge the words, didn't break stride, didn't even turn his head. "I don't think about you at all." The words landed with more force than any insult could. Daschle stood in the parking garage, watching Maxwell's taillights disappear, realizing that indifference was the cruelest response possible. Maxwell had given himself 90 days to complete Phase 1 of his plan. 73 remained. Back in the pool house, Esther found him reviewing acquisition documents at 2 in the morning. She'd noticed the changes in her husband over recent weeks. He spoke less at dinner, when he bothered attending. He spent every evening with files she'd never seen. When she asked about daily progress, his responses grew shorter, more clinical. "The Adrian Zhao name," she said, standing in his doorway. "You mentioned someone my father destroyed. Someone who deserved better. Was that someone important?" Maxwell didn't look up from his laptop. "Someone whose legacy I'm protecting. By saving the people who destroyed him? By transforming what they built on stolen brilliance into something worthy of that brilliance." Esther stepped closer. "You're different now, colder, more distant, even with me." Maxwell finally met her eyes. "I'm focused. There's a difference." "Is there?" She sat on the edge of his desk. "Because it feels like you're disappearing. Like the man I married is being replaced by someone I don't recognize." "Maybe you never recognized him in the first place." Maxwell's words weren't cruel, just honest. "Maybe you saw who you wanted to see. The grateful charity case who'd overlook humiliation because he loved you." Tears formed in Esther's eyes. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Maxwell's laugh held no humor. "Your family spent 3 years making sure I understood my place. Now I'm teaching them theirs. If that makes me different, good." On day 58, Maxwell scheduled a mandatory board meeting. The email subject line read, "Beaumont Global True Origins." Reginald tried to cancel it from his wheelchair, sending frantic messages to board members. Maxwell's reply was 2 words, "Be there." For the first time in Beaumont history, Reginald Beaumont was taking orders from the son-in-law he'd called worthless. And in 3 days, the entire world would understand why. What would you do in Maxwell's position? Comment below. Your perspective matters. Share this with someone who needs to know their power. The countdown clock appeared on Maxwell's desk calendar, a physical reminder written in red marker. 90 days to complete Phase 1. Each morning, he crossed off another number. Each evening, he reviewed progress against benchmarks only he understood. 73 days remaining, 68, 55. Each day brought small victories that compounded into transformation. The first ethical safety audit came back clean. Press release issued, "Beaumont Global achieves perfect FDA compliance rating." The Patient Advocacy Partnership launched. Nonprofit organizations that had condemned the company now cautiously praised the new direction. Pharmaceutical giant demonstrates commitment to affordable medicine. The restructured board met weekly instead of quarterly. Every decision documented, every vote recorded, transparency replacing the secrecy that had enabled corruption. But while Maxwell rebuilt the company's foundation, he disappeared further from his own marriage. Esther would find his side of the bed empty at 3 a.m., see lights glowing in the pool house, know he was working, but feel unable to reach him. She asked about the Adrian Zhao name during dinner one night. Maxwell was actually present for once, though his attention remained on his phone, monitoring acquisition negotiations. "Who was Adrian Zhao?" she pressed. "Why did mentioning his name terrify my father?" Maxwell set down his phone. "Someone your father destroyed, someone who deserved better, someone whose life's work was stolen and whose legacy was erased." "Were you investigating my family before we even met?" The question came out sharper than Esther intended. "Was any of it real? Our relationship? Our marriage?" "I loved you." Past tense. The distinction wasn't lost on either of them. "I married you genuinely. I didn't know about Adrian Zhao until months after our wedding. When I found those files, I had a choice: destroy your family or honor what Adrian believed in. I chose honor." "By becoming someone I don't recognize?" Maxwell stood, gathering his laptop and files. "You want me to stay the invisible man your family could dismiss, the charity case who smiled through insults. I'm not that person anymore. Maybe I never was." Day 58 arrived like thunder. Maxwell's email went out at 6 a.m. Mandatory board meeting, noon today, attendance non-negotiable. Subject: Beaumont Global, True Origins. Reginald's response came within minutes. "This meeting is unnecessary. Let's discuss privately first." Maxwell's reply: "Be there." 2 words that shifted the entire power dynamic. The patriarch begging for privacy, the son-in-law granting none. Daschle tried intimidation. "Whatever game you're playing ends today. We've tolerated your control long enough." Maxwell didn't reply at all. Silence spoke louder. Cordelia attempted manipulation through Esther. "Please ask Maxwell to reconsider. This public revelation will destroy us. Surely there's a way to handle this privately, as family." Esther delivered the message. Maxwell's response chilled her. "We're not family. We never were. They made sure of that." At 11:45, Maxwell entered the boardroom carrying a single folder. The Beaumonts sat at the table, Reginald in his wheelchair looking decades older, Cordelia's hands shaking despite medication, Daschle's aggressive posture barely hiding terror. The board members, lawyers, and crisis consultants filled the remaining seats. Janet gave Maxwell an encouraging nod. She'd seen pieces of what was coming. She understood the significance. Maxwell placed the folder on the table. Didn't open it yet. Just let it sit there, like evidence at a trial. "For 30 years, he began, Beaumont Global has celebrated its founder's genius. Reginald Beaumont, the visionary who revolutionized generic drug manufacturing. The brilliant innovator who built an empire from scratch." Reginald's functioning hand gripped his wheelchair arm. Cordelia's breathing accelerated. "Every story has 2 sides." Maxwell opened the folder. "This is the side you buried." For the first time in Beaumont history, the truth was about to become public, and the man they'd called worthless held every piece of evidence needed to rewrite their entire legacy. Maxwell spread documents across the conference table like playing cards revealing a winning hand. Patent applications from 30 years ago, partnership agreements, dissolution paperwork, legal filings, each page another nail in the coffin of the Beaumont mythology. Adrian Zhao. Maxwell's voice carried across the silent boardroom. Brilliant chemist, revolutionary innovator, the actual creator of the formulations that launched Beaumont Global from regional supplier to national powerhouse. He displayed the first patent application, Adrian Zhao's signature in blue ink, chemical formulas written in precise notation, date stamp, January 1995. Adrian developed the breakthrough processes for cost-effective generic drug manufacturing while working as a research scientist. Reginald provided initial capital and business connections. 50-50 partnership, equal shares, or that was the agreement. Reginald tried to speak. Maxwell raised one hand. Silence. The patriarch's mouth closed. Within 18 months, the partnership began changing. Maxwell displayed amendment after amendment. Ownership percentages shifted. Adrian's share decreased from 50% to 40 to 30 to 20. Each change accompanied by legal justifications claiming breach of contract, failure to meet development deadlines, violations of non-compete clauses. Janet leaned forward, studying the documents. Her expression shifted from curiosity to horror as she recognized the pattern. Adrian fought back. Maxwell showed countersuits filed by Adrian Zhao, each one eventually withdrawn. But he couldn't afford lawyers like the Beaumonts could. He couldn't match Reginald's legal warfare. So eventually he signed away everything. His innovations, his patents, his legacy. All of it transferred to Beaumont Global for $1 and the promise that his name would remain on the research. Maxwell pulled out a final document. Transfer of intellectual property. Adrian Zhao's signature shaky and defeated. Date, March 1997. That promise was broken immediately. Every patent was refiled under Beaumont Global. Every research paper was republished without Adrian's name. History was rewritten to make Reginald the sole genius behind the empire. Cordelia's face had gone white. Dashiell stared at the documents like they might catch fire. Reginald's wheelchair shifted backward, a physical retreat from truth. Adrian Zhao spent the rest of his life in poverty. Broken, bitter, forgotten. He died of a stress-induced heart attack at 47 years old, watching from across the city as the Beaumonts celebrated success built on his stolen work. Maxwell reached into his briefcase and pulled out a photograph, placed it on top of the documents. Young Adrian Zhao in his laboratory coat, holding a baby. The baby's face was clearly visible. Adrian Zhao was my father. The boardroom erupted. Board members gasped. Lawyers grabbed documents. The crisis consultant's face showed the exact moment she understood the magnitude of the situation. I watched him break. Maxwell's voice remained steady despite emotion threatening to crack it. I watched my brilliant father live in poverty while you displayed your self-made success. I listened to him apologize for not providing better, never understanding that he'd created something worth hundreds of millions and had it stolen. I was at his funeral at 17, wondering why the genius who'd worked himself to death had nothing to show for it. Esther's hand covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I married Esther, genuinely loving her, never knowing the connection. I worked my way through college and graduate school with my father's unfulfilled legacy as motivation. I became a data analyst specializing in pharmaceutical economics because part of me wanted to understand the industry that had destroyed him. Maxwell's hands were steady as he continued. Then I met Esther at a soup kitchen, fell in love with a woman trapped in a gilded cage, married into a family that treated me with contempt, and 6 months into that marriage, while searching the company archives for financial data, I found these files. He gestured to the evidence spread across the table. Everything. The partnership agreements, the systematic theft, the legal warfare, the deliberate erasure of my father's name from his own innovations. All of it carefully hidden, but never actually destroyed. Reginald finally found his voice, weak and desperate. Maxwell, please, we can negotiate. Name your price, controlling stake, CEO position, anything you want. We'll make this right. You can't make this right. Maxwell's words cut through the patriarch's pleading. My father is dead. You killed him. Not with a weapon, but with theft and cruelty and systematic destruction. You took everything he created and claimed it as your own. You built an empire on stolen brilliance while he died forgotten. Cordelia reached across the table, her trembling hand trying to touch Maxwell's arm. We destroyed you for 3 years. We called you charity case. We treated you like nothing. And all this time you were Adrian's son. Oh God, what have we done? What you always do. Maxwell pulled his arm away. You take what you want and destroy anyone who gets in your way. You did it to my father. You tried to do it to me. The difference is, I fought back in ways you never saw coming." The boardroom door opened. Media representatives entered. Mainstream news, financial press, industry publications. Maxwell had invited them, had given them time to arrive between his email announcement and the actual meeting. Cameras started rolling. Reporters pulled out notepads. This wasn't a private family meeting anymore. This was a public reckoning. Adrian Zhao was the true founder of Beaumont Global. Maxwell spoke directly to the cameras. "The patents prove it. The partnership agreements prove it. The systematic theft is documented. And I, his son, have spent the last 90 days saving the company built on his stolen legacy. Not for the Beaumonts, but for the 8,000 employees who need jobs and the millions of patients who need affordable medications." News broke instantly. Social media exploded. Beaumont empire built on stolen innovation. Son of betrayed scientist reveals decades of corporate theft. Financial networks interrupted regular programming. Breaking: Beaumont Global founder allegedly stole patents from partner. Reginald's phone buzzed with messages from other board members, investors, social connections, everyone suddenly distancing themselves from the scandal. Maxwell turned back to the stunned boardroom. "I could destroy you completely. I have every legal right to claim ownership of half this company. I have documentation proving decades of fraud. I could send you to prison, Reginald. I could strip away everything you've built. I could get justice for my father." Silence hung heavy. Everyone waited for the verdict. "But I won't." Maxwell's next words shocked the room more than anything that came before. "Because my father believed in integrity. He believed medicine should heal people, not enrich criminals. He believed in doing right even when the world was wrong. If I destroy you for revenge, I dishonor everything he stood for." Esther stood, walked to Maxwell, took his hand. "Why didn't you destroy us? You had every right, every piece of evidence, every moral justification." "Because destruction would make me like them." Maxwell squeezed her hand, the first tender gesture in weeks. "I'm not saving the Beaumonts. I'm saving my father's legacy by transforming his stolen creation into what he always wanted it to be: ethical, transparent, patient-focused." Reginald tried to speak again. Maxwell raised his hand. Silence. This time, the patriarch didn't even try. "Here's what happens next." Maxwell pulled out another document. "I'm creating the Adrian Zhao Foundation, funded by 10% of Beaumont Global's restructured profits, dedicated to supporting ethical scientists whose innovations deserve recognition and protection. The foundation will operate completely independently, and its offices will occupy the East Wing of the Beaumont estate." The East Wing. Visible from every window of the main house, a permanent reminder of the man they destroyed and the son they underestimated. "Reginald will see it every single day." Maxwell looked directly at his father-in-law. "You'll watch ethical scientists being celebrated and protected in ways you never protected my father. You'll live with the knowledge that the empire you stole is finally serving the purpose my father intended. And you'll do it in silence, because any attempt to fight this will result in me releasing additional evidence of corporate fraud that will send you to prison." Cameras captured every moment. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was a morality tale playing out in real time. The underestimated son-in-law, the stolen legacy, the choice between revenge and redemption. Maxwell gathered his documents. Implementation of Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Janet will serve as interim CEO during the transition. I'll continue as uncompensated strategic consultant until the foundation is established. Then I'm done. "Done?" Esther's voice cracked. "With the Beaumonts? With this house? With being invisible while surrounded by people who should have seen me?" Maxwell looked at her with something between love and exhaustion. "I saved your family because you asked. Because employees need jobs. Because patients need medicine. But I don't owe you proximity to my pain. He walked toward the door, past the cameras, past the stunned board members, past 3 years of accumulated humiliation finally acknowledged and avenged. Not through destruction, but through transformation. If you believe integrity beats revenge every time, comment legacy over vengeance right now. This is for everyone who's been counted out but refuses to count themselves out. 6 months after the revelation, Maxwell stood in the back of a crowded auditorium watching Esther cut the ribbon on the Zhao Foundation. Press cameras flashed. Scientists applauded. Board members who'd once ignored Maxwell now praised his vision. The foundation's headquarters occupied the Beaumont estate's entire east wing, renovated, modernized, transformed from family luxury into scientific research space. Laboratories where ballrooms once stood, research libraries where wine cellars gathered dust, young scientists working late into the night where party guests had once celebrated inherited privilege. Maxwell had designed every detail. His father's photograph hung in the main entrance, larger than life. Zhao, brilliant chemist, revolutionary innovator, true founder of breakthrough generic drug manufacturing processes. The placard beneath listed every patent he'd created, every innovation he'd developed, every contribution the Beaumonts had tried to erase. Esther's speech focused on integrity, ethics, supporting scientists whose work changes lives. She spoke well. She'd always been good with words. But Maxwell noticed she avoided looking at the main house windows where Reginald watched from his wheelchair. Cordelia stood with her pill bottles. Dashiell stared with hollow eyes. They saw the foundation every day. Couldn't avoid it. Couldn't escape the reminder of their crimes and their Savior's mercy. After the ceremony, Reginald approached Maxwell near the refreshment tables. The patriarch moved slowly, still recovering from his stroke, his face carrying permanent evidence of stress and defeat. "I was wrong about you." Reginald's words came with difficulty. "About everything. The way we treated you, the assumptions we made. I'd like to start over, build something better. As family." Maxwell looked at him for a long moment, studied the man who'd stolen his father's legacy and destroyed his father's life, the man who'd called him charity case, the man who'd toasted to lowered expectations, the man who now needed him more than he'd ever needed anyone. Then Maxwell turned away without speaking, walked to where Esther stood, talking with Foundation scientists, didn't acknowledge the plea, didn't grant forgiveness, didn't give Reginald the closure he desperately wanted. Complete indifference, the cruelest punishment of all. Beaumont Global's comeback made financial headlines. Ethical transformation restores pharmaceutical giant to profitability. Stock prices recovered. New contracts materialized. The company Maxwell had saved thrived under ethical leadership, but Maxwell wasn't there to see it. 2 weeks after the foundation opened, he and Esther moved into their own home. Modern, modest, located 40 minutes from the Beaumont estate, far enough for distance, close enough for Esther to maintain family relationships if she chose. The house reflected who they were becoming. Esther's artwork covered the walls, paintings she'd created during their healing process, abstract expressions of pain and forgiveness. Maxwell's father's old research notes occupied the study, carefully preserved in archival folders. The life they built together honored both their pasts while refusing to be defined by them. Cordelia sent a handwritten letter 3 months after they moved. "We're family. Please forgive us. We need you." The envelope sat on their kitchen counter for a week. Esther kept asking what Maxwell wanted to do with it. He never opened it. Never responded. Eventually, Esther threw it away. Maxwell accepted a position teaching pharmaceutical economics at the State University, where he'd earned his master's degree. The participation trophy education, Reginald had mocked. His students were brilliant, hungry, ethical. Many came from backgrounds like his, brilliant minds from families without connections or wealth. He told them about his father, about stolen innovations, about fighting back through strategy rather than rage, about choosing integrity over revenge, about transforming systems from within rather than burning them down. One afternoon, Esther found him in the foundation office. Maxwell was teaching young scientists about ethical patent protection, intellectual property rights, ways to defend innovations from corporate theft. Adrian Zhao's photograph watched over the room from its place on the wall. "There's something I need to tell you." Esther's hand rested on her stomach. "We're going to have a daughter." Maxwell's expression shifted, the first unguarded emotion he'd shown in months. Joy, fear, hope, all of it visible for just a moment before he pulled Esther close. "What should we name her?" Esther whispered. "Adrian." Maxwell's voice broke slightly. "So my father's legacy lives in someone who'll never be forgotten? Someone who'll grow up knowing her grandfather was brilliant and ethical and deserving of every recognition he never received?" Esther nodded against his chest, tears mixing with unexpected laughter. Their daughter would carry her grandfather's name, would learn his story, would understand that integrity matters more than revenge, that transformation beats destruction, that choosing character over cruelty defines who we become. Once invisible, now undeniable. Once dismissed, now legendary. Maxwell hadn't destroyed the Beaumonts, hadn't saved them for their sake. He'd honored his father by choosing integrity over revenge, and in doing so, he'd become exactly what they could never be, truly self-made. Your story matters too. Whether you're being underestimated right now or you've risen from it, you're part of this community. We celebrate those who choose character over cruelty, legacy over revenge, and building over burning. Hit like if you believe our choices define us more than our circumstances. Comment, "I choose integrity" if you're committed to rising the right way. Subscribe for more stories where the overlooked become unstoppable. The final image belonged to Maxwell and Esther, walking through foundation hallways 9 months later, baby Adrian sleeping in her mother's arms. They passed walls displaying Adrian Zhao's name and achievements, finally recognized after decades of erasure. Through the windows, the Beaumont mansion was visible in the distance, smaller now, less imposing, fading into irrelevance. Maxwell didn't look back. Didn't need to. The past had been acknowledged. The future was being built, and the legacy that mattered, his father's legacy of integrity and innovation, would live on through generations who'd never forget the man who revolutionized medicine while the world tried to erase him. He wasn't the poor son-in-law anymore. He was the man who saved a billion-dollar family and in the process saved his father's legacy from obscurity. And that was worth more than any Beaumont fortune could ever measure. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next powerful story that inspires change. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Together, we're building a community where integrity wins, where the underestimated rise, and where every voice matters. What's your story of choosing character over revenge? Tell us below and inspire others walking similar paths.